18 months ago, the entire tech world agreed on a single, undeniable truth. Google was dead. ChatGPT had arrived, and the 20-year reign of the ultimate search monopoly was over. Every headline, every podcast, every Silicon Valley insider repeated the exact same eulogy. OpenAI won. Google lost. It was game over. And for a brief, chaotic moment, the evidence was impossible to ignore. When Google rushed its first artificial intelligence competitor out the door in February of 2023, the result was a catastrophic public humiliation. The bot was named Bard, and during its very first livestream announcement, it hallucinated a completely fake fact about the James Webb Telescope. In an instant, panic set in. Investors wiped $100 billion off Google's market cap. The hunter had suddenly become the hunted. Inside Google headquarters, executives slammed the panic button, declaring a code red. The situation grew so dire that legendary co-founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin were literally pulled out of retirement just to review code. Every move Google made seemed to backfire. They eventually rebranded to Gemini, only for the world to discover their breathtaking launch demo wasn't actually live, but a carefully staged illusion using static frames. Meanwhile, their new AI overviews were actively advising users to eat rocks. The company that built the modern internet was suddenly the laughingstock of the industry. The core team that literally invented the transformer architecture was fleeing Mountain View to join rival startups. The narrative was firmly locked in place. OpenAI was the untouchable titan of the new era. But narratives are deeply dangerous things. They blind us to the underlying mechanics of power. Because if you fast forward to today, the landscape hasn't just shifted. It has violently inverted. The pendulum has swung back with a force nobody anticipated. Google did not collapse under its own bureaucratic weight. Instead, they quietly engineered the greatest comeback in the history of Silicon Valley. Today, Alphabet's stock is hitting all-time highs. Their latest model, Gemini 3, has fundamentally crushed the competition. It swept the major leaderboards, taking the top spots on humanity's last exam and math arena. Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, just publicly dumped ChatGPT and migrated his entire company over to Gemini. The roles have completely reversed. Now, it is OpenAI operating under an internal code red. To understand how this happened, you have to look past the flashy demos and the viral hype. You have to understand that the artificial intelligence war was never actually a battle of who could build the smartest chatbot. It was a brutal, invisible war over three critical pillars: data, compute, and distribution. Think of this like the geopolitical oil wars of the past century. In this new digital economy, the training data is the raw oil. The compute power, the silicon chips processing that data are the refineries. And the distribution networks are the pipelines delivering the final product to the world. OpenAI had a brilliant product, but they had absolutely no oil, no refineries, and no pipelines of their own. Let's look at the data first. To build the most advanced models, you need an endless, constantly refreshing ocean of high-quality human information. Meta sits on a goldmine of daily human behavior through Instagram and Facebook. Elon Musk's XAI taps directly into the real-time global consciousness of Twitter. But OpenAI? They own nothing. They are entirely dependent on scraping the web and signing partner deals. Google, on the other hand, is the internet. They possess the single largest repository of human knowledge ever assembled. They control Google Search, indexing every website on Earth. They own YouTube, the largest video platform in existence, feeding their models endless temporal streams of visual and audio data. They have Google Maps, tracking global physical movement. They scanned 40 million books. They monitor user behavior across billions of Android and Chrome devices. And when they realized they needed more authentic conversational human data to perfectly mimic human nuance, they simply handed Reddit $60 million a year for exclusive access. Google's data pipeline is an automated, infinite feedback loop that no other company on the planet can even dream of replicating. But raw data is useless without the hardware to process it. You need the refineries. You need the compute. Right now, the entire artificial intelligence industry is caught in a terrifying bottleneck. Meta, XAI, Microsoft, Anthropic, and OpenAI are all completely dependent on a single company for their processing power: NVIDIA. This absolute reliance is why NVIDIA's valuation exploded to $4 trillion. Every time OpenAI wants to train a new model or serve a user, they are forced to pay astronomical premiums to NVIDIA and Microsoft Azure. They are trapped in an incredibly hostile ecosystem, except for Google. Years before ChatGPT even existed, Google quietly began designing and fabricating their own custom silicon. They built tensor processing units, or TPUs. Today, Google's entire artificial intelligence infrastructure, from Google Search to the new Gemini 3 models, runs on these proprietary chips. They bypass the NVIDIA tax entirely. This self-reliance gives Google an almost unfair structural advantage. They operate the third largest cloud platform on Earth. They don't have to beg Microsoft for server space. And this massive infrastructure advantage translates directly into the ultimate weapon in business: pricing power. The math behind OpenAI's business model is genuinely terrifying. For every single dollar OpenAI earns, they burn $1.69. Let that sink in. They lose money on every transaction. Running a heavy model like Sora costs them $15 million every single day. They cannot simply raise their subscription prices because their competitors are treating artificial intelligence as a free, subsidized feature. Google can afford to give PhD-level intelligence away for free because they are backed by the most profitable advertising machine in human history. OpenAI's only product is the intelligence itself. This dynamic reached a boiling point with the simultaneous releases of OpenAI's flagship GPT 5.2 and Google's Gemini 3 Flash. The comparison is frankly embarrassing. Gemini 3 Flash is Google's cheapest, fastest model, yet it scores 30% higher in accuracy than OpenAI's premium tier. It is vastly superior at multimodal reasoning, processing video as a native temporal stream rather than clumsily analyzing static frames. It boasts a massive 1 million token context window, dwarfing GPT 5.2's capacity. But the real kill shot is the price. Gemini 3 Flash offers developers 99% of the capability of a flagship model at a fraction of the cost. If you are building a startup, it makes zero financial sense to use anything else. And if you look closely, you can see the talent reading the writing on the wall. The war for top engineering talent is ruthless, where hiring takes 6 months but acquisitions take 6 weeks. Google is moving with lethal precision. Back in July, the co-founders of Windsurf abruptly abandoned their employees, took a non-exclusive license to their tech, and joined Google in a massive $2.4 billion deal. The immediate result of that acquisition was the launch of Google Anti-Gravity, a deeply integrated agentic development platform that allows users to manage autonomous AI workers. This brings us to the final, most devastating pillar of the war: distribution. 3 years ago, people fundamentally misunderstood why Google was so powerful. The narrative assumed that having the best model was enough to win, but an internal Google document leaked to the public explicitly stated the truth. They admitted, "We have no moat, and neither does OpenAI." The technological gap inevitably closes. Models commoditize. If everyone has access to God-tier intelligence, the winner isn't the one with the smartest bot. The winner is the one who owns the default access point. OpenAI built a cultural juggernaut. 800 million people use ChatGPT. But it remains just a standalone app. It is a destination you have to consciously decide to visit. Google doesn't need to convince you to download anything. They already own the environment you live in. 31.7 billion searches happen on Google every single day. There are 3 billion active Android devices globally. 2.5 billion people use YouTube. Google Chrome dominates the browser market. Google Workspace rules the enterprise. When Google decided to push Gemini to the world, they didn't run a marketing campaign. They just flipped a switch. They baked it into the search bar, directly reaching 2 billion users overnight. They integrated it into Gmail, Docs, and Sheets. They made Gemini the default assistant on 3 billion phones. You don't switch to a new product. Google simply changes the products you're already hopelessly dependent on. This is default distribution. And it is a cage that OpenAI is desperately trying to escape. OpenAI is essentially renting their existence. They owe Microsoft 20% of all revenue. They are locked into a massive Azure cloud commitment. The platform owners capture all the margin. The pie gets sliced so many times that OpenAI is left fighting over the scraps. They are slowly being reduced to expensive middleware. You can clearly see the panic setting in at OpenAI. The hunter is throwing Hail Marys just to survive, to bypass Google and Apple's chokehold on distribution. CEO Sam Altman is taking the biggest gamble of his life. He poured $6.5 billion into a hardware startup led by legendary designer Jony Ive. The plan is to invent an entirely new category of consumer device, something you carry alongside your phone, just so OpenAI can finally own a platform. But the graveyard of AI hardware is already overflowing. The Humane AI pin was dead on arrival, and the Rabbit R1 vanished after selling a fraction of its inventory. If this multi-billion-dollar hardware bet fails, OpenAI has almost no backup plan. Their only other lifeline is forcing advertisements into ChatGPT, trying to build an ad network from scratch. But they are going up against Google, a titan with 2 decades of deeply entrenched advertiser relationships, conversion tracking, and infinite data. If ChatGPT becomes clogged with intrusive ads, users will effortlessly migrate to a cleaner interface like Gemini or Claude. The contrast in leadership perfectly captures this terrifying reality. Listen to them speak, and the tonal shift is staggering. In recent interviews, Sam Altman relies on long, evasive analogies, dodging direct questions about his company's massive cash burn. He sounds like a salesman trying to keep the hype cycle alive. OpenAI is licensing Disney characters for Sora and reportedly exploring an adult mode for 2026 just to keep people engaged. They are pitching trillion-dollar infrastructure plans that sound more like science fiction than business strategy. Then, listen to Demis Hassabis, the CEO of Google DeepMind. He doesn't talk about robot girlfriends or internet slop. He talks with chilling, quiet confidence about curing diseases and pushing the absolute frontier of scientific discovery. He is a visionary operating a machine that is fully awakened. The greatest trick the tech industry ever played was convincing the world that the AI war was over before it even truly began. OpenAI showed humanity that artificial intelligence could feel like magic, but magic is not a business model. Magic cannot survive a war of attrition against infinite capital, self-replicating data pipelines, and absolute control over the world's digital infrastructure. The narrative has shattered. The illusion is gone. Google didn't just survive the asteroid impact, they absorbed its energy, evolved, and methodically suffocated the very company that tried to replace them. But if you think this is where the trail ends, you're missing the bigger picture. The true scale of this goes much deeper, which is exactly what we uncovered in LLMs cannot reason. AGI is mathematically impossible.